Hello everyone, Storm101 here. Today we'll be checking out some of our early thoughts for the upcoming winter of 2022 and 2023. We'll be checking out some of the factors, some weather models, and also some of my thoughts on the Climate Prediction Center's forecast as well. Before we get started in this video, if you guys like weather-related content like this, you can subscribe to my channel. We'll have more updates on this type of subject over the next couple months, really until maybe about late November or early December, depending on how my schedule goes to that time period as well. But we're going to start off with some of my early thoughts, and this is also the first time we're doing it for this upcoming winter. And we're going to start off with sea surface temperature anomalies. And there's definitely a few things to note right off the bat. One of those is in the equatorial Pacific. We are still in a La Nina pattern, and we could go on run. We could run for La Nina for 3 winters in a row. Historically, it's pretty rare. In the past 100 years, it's only happened twice. So happening it for a third time, it's pretty rare to see that. And as we know of, La Nina typically brings more active weather, especially in the eastern U.S., and we've seen that over the past 2 winters, especially last winter. For some areas, it's definitely been pretty harsh as well. But there's other areas to focus. One area is the northern Pacific, and the secondary area that I'm watching is south of Greenland and just east of Canada. Both of these areas, what they have in common is above normal sea surface temperature anomalies. And typically when you have above normal sea surface temperature anomalies, usually a ridge of high pressure could easily build over those areas. And both of these are in a decently good place. In the northern Pacific, it's a tad bit weaker, but it has been trending warmer over the past couple weeks, which is a really good trend if you're a snow lover, because typically with a ridge of high pressure that could build over the northern Pacific, that could definitely lead to some troughs, and colder air could definitely spill into parts of the central and eastern U.S. Meanwhile, this other pocket of well above normal sea surface temperatures, just south of Greenland, it's much stronger. It's also been pushing a little bit farther north, too. And if it does continue to push farther north, that can help lead to a more of a negative NAO pattern. That could really help influence cold air shots in the eastern U.S. So, right off the bat, when it comes to sea surface temperatures, it's a good start, but there's still plenty of time for changes. Over the past couple weeks, it was a little bit cooler in the northern Pacific, but it has been slowly warming. But there's another area that I want to mention that's more of a wild card, really off the East Coast. Now, since Hurricane Ian and Fiona has passed, sea surface temperatures and anomalies in some of these areas has cooled significantly. We used to have well above normal sea surface temperature anomalies in some of these areas, which, if the tropics did not touch these areas, that would definitely lead to some serious ridging issues in the parts of the eastern U.S., and areas along the East Coast wouldn't have much luck when it comes to big snows. But after those 2 tropical systems, it has cooled down significantly in some areas. Along the East Coast, it's generally below average, but not too far off the coast. It's actually closer to average. And my bigger question is, can those sea surface temperature anomalies recover? And what I mean by that, could it warm back up again? If it does, that could lead to some ridging issues along the East Coast. And it'd be kind of similar to last winter, where some of our storm systems were more into the interior northeast and along or east of the Interstate 95 corridor. So that definitely be something to watch here. But also, it may not be a very good moisture supply for future snowstorms. Typically, when you have above normal sea surface temperature anomalies, especially if you're well above normal, that can actually lead to a really good moisture supply for big snowstorms. But really, at this point here, it's actually closer to neutral at the moment. And we still have to give us a few more weeks to really see how this area is going to turn out. So at the moment, still some high uncertainty. But regardless of that, we still got a pretty good start as a snow lover myself here in Kentucky. But let's go back to the Enzo. Subsurface temperature departures in the equatorial Pacific. This is a pretty important factor for the Enzo because there's a chance that at least in the second half of winter, we may actually weaken into a neutral Enzo. And here's why. So in the eastern part of the equatorial Pacific, we got cooler than normal anomalies, really since August 1st. And you can see here, it's been sustaining pretty well. It's actually kind of gained a little bit stronger. However, on the western end of the equatorial Pacific, it's been slowly warming up and getting a little bit stronger. That'll be another area to watch because if that continues to grow, especially farther eastward, that can help weaken the La Nina, and that could potentially lead to a neutral Enzo. Which will check, which will take a look at the difference between a La Nina and the Enzo and the overall pattern here in a little bit. But let's check out some other things on here, like some weather model data. So here's the CPC forecast, and here's winter right here, and for La Nina conditions, I guess about 60 to 70% chance. So it's still a pretty decent probability for La Nina. But for neutral, it's still a low end 30%. But that neutral chances really increase as you get into the spring of next year. Really by spring of 2023, really neutral Enzo is about 60 to 70% chance. So more than likely, really by I would say at the beginning of 2023, La Nina probably would begin to weaken at that point. And if it were to weaken a little bit quicker than expected, we could see more of a neutral Enzo type of winter than a La Nina winter. So really, a third winter in a row of La Nina conditions is still up in the air, or in other words, a wild card. Because neutral Enzo could move in. Now, neutral Enzo is not necessarily a bad thing. But here's some other models here to kind of look at it. And winter is right here. And really below this line here, below that line is La Nina conditions. Above that, around 0, that is neutral Enzo conditions. And you can see here, most of the models actually like it to keep it in La Nina, which will be some good news for some folks out there. Maybe not so much for areas in the southeast. But I mean, still, even for a La Nina pattern, still could be pretty good for some folks. But models in general like at least a La Nina pattern, but I think it'll be on the weak La Nina at that point. But as you get into the spring of 2023, which winter can easily go into early portions of spring, you can see there it does trend towards neutral as well. If we scroll this down a little bit, here's the CFS V2, and it basically shows a very similar thing here. Here's winter, and below this line here is La Nina conditions, and you can see there, at least for the mean, it likes to keep it at least in a weak La Nina state at that point. And here's another way to look at it. Here's winter right here, and you can see there's still a pretty good La Nina at that point. But March, April, and May, you can see here how it really weakens quite a bit. Now, there's still plenty of time for changes. That's still pretty far out. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see how the Enzo is going to evolve over the next few months or so. But what does a La Nina pattern look like, at least on an average La Nina? So it's generally colder and wetter in the northwest. That is very large. At least we can still see the image. But anyway, so in the northwest, generally colder and wetter. You got the Pacific jet stream that rolls over those areas. That could bring in some good winters up there. We got the polar jet stream that moves through parts of the northern plains into the Midwest, and it kind of ends up in the Great Lakes region. But across the South in general, it's generally warm and dry. Not the best for those folks down there across the South. But in the Ohio Valley, that's where you kind of get a lot of the uncertainty that kind of come in. Now, on a typical La Nina, it's generally wetter and also warmer. You can still see some good snows during La Nina in the Ohio Valley, but really, in general, it's typically warmer than average. I mean, last winter, it was very snowy. It was also cold as well, so not all La Ninas are the same. But here's, I believe, your subtropical jet stream kind of rolling over some of those areas as well. So not a terrible pattern here. It's definitely a pretty good pattern for the northwest for snow levers up there. But how about the neutral Enzo, which will be a possibility at least towards the end of winter into the early spring? The colder air is actually shifted farther to the east. It's actually more focused in the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, the Great Lakes, and even the parts of the Northeast. Here's our polar jet stream right here. Give me just a second. There we go. So here's your polar jet stream right here. You got your subtropical jet stream here. And wherever they merge in this area here, that's where you can really get some big nor'easters. In the Pacific jet stream, it's generally a little bit weaker, but it can still bring some decent systems for the northwest. But it's closer to average up there. And of course, it's generally warm across the south, and it's generally wetter across the southeast as well. So even in a neutral Enzo winter, it still could be pretty good for a lot of areas in the eastern U.S. But then again, not all winters are the same. Let's check out some weather models. This is the Jamstack model, which is back this year, and I'm just gonna just tell you guys there are a couple of red flags, and I'll explain why here in a little bit. But sea surface temperature wise, in the Enzo in particular, it's actually closer to neutral, um, or maybe a very weak La Nina in the neutral Enzo. But in the northern Pacific, it's actually kind of a negative PDO pattern, or maybe neutral. There's an area of closer to average because of sea surface temperatures, but just in the southwest, you got this big bubble of well above normal sea surface temperatures. And what this could lead to is you can get that trough that can move through the northwest. We also got well above normal sea surface temperatures really across around the Arctic Circle and parts of Canada that could lead to some ridging over some of those areas as well. But also along the east coast, you also got well above normal sea surface temperatures out there as well. So really, wherever I kind of looked at this, this is going to be a very warm look if the Jamstack model were to be correct. All that cold air could be more focused in the northwest, which if I show you guys the surface air temperatures, yeah, generally warm. Keeps a lot of that colder air more focused into western British Columbia. But like I said earlier, there's one red flag I wanted to note. If we're to go back to at least for the next 2 months and go to sea surface temperature anomalies for October through December, the Jamstack model is not really picking up on the sea surface temperatures that's going on up here. Here's the sea surface temperatures right now. It's generally above average. Meanwhile, on the Jamstack model, it's not really picking up very well. I mean, I guess you could say it does pick up some of those above normal sea surface temperatures farther to the south, but really a more favorable area for a colder, snowier winter for the eastern U.S. You want it more closer to British Columbia and or Alaska as well. So there's one little red flag there, and that may be why it's a little bit warmer. Because if we go to December, February, mix here it's about the same. But I do think in reality, I think it's going to be a little bit warmer up there, which I think it's going to be able to help push some of this colder air in western British Columbia a little bit deeper into parts of the central U.S. and possibly the eastern U.S. And then there's this other area here. The area where we actually have well above normal sea surface temperatures, the Jamstack model says maybe slightly below average. But if we go back to October through December, it's closer to neutral. If we go back to what's right now, it is the complete opposite. So I'm going to take the Jamstack model as a grain of salt, but it could trend towards these solutions. Time will tell on that. But the one last thing I want to check out is precipitation anomalies. This is a good way to kind of show where your jet stream is going to be setting up. And if we go to December for February, you can see here possibly your Pacific jet stream will be decently active in the northwest. Your polar jet stream may be slightly active, but it kind of moves through parts of Montana, maybe into parts of Idaho. We got a couple of spots of above normal precipitation. But look at that in the southeast. It's got a very dry signal down there, but even also for parts of California looking pretty dry too. We also have this area of above normal precipitation anomalies over the Midwest, the Great Lakes, even the parts of the Northeast. And I think in reality here, I think some of these above normal precipitation anomalies will be a little bit farther south. If the models were to correct themselves to some of the current sea surface temperatures, I think this will definitely have a little bit more of a colder look. And what I mean by a colder look, when you look to precipitation anomalies, that jet stream pattern, which, if I can do this here, kind of shows something like this. I think it could be a little bit farther south than that. But that's just one model. Let's check out another model, which will be the Kansas model. So this is a 3-month average, December, January, February, 500 millibar geopotential height anomalies. Okay, it's not nearly as bad when it comes to the JAMSAC model standpoint. Now, it does not have sea surface temperatures, but it does have these geopotential height anomalies, which kind of gives you indicators where your ridge's high pressure could be. I noticed that over Greenland, the NAO region could be closer to average. Either it well, this can mean two things. Number one, it may stay neutral throughout most of winter, or it can have these major flip-flops. Maybe one week it's a positive NAO, and maybe a couple weeks later it may be a negative NAO. And a positive NAO, that typically leads to a lot of ridging in parts of the eastern U.S., but when you have a negative NAO, it's generally the opposite. You can get some pretty good cold shots, and it could come with a decent amount of snow. But if I were to kind of compare this to the current sea surface temperatures, at least at the moment, if I were to go back to like September, October, November, it's not bad. I mean, at least it's showing or indicates those well above normal sea surface temperature anomalies just south of Greenland. So I will give it some credit on that. But I think it's also kind of missing out some of those sea surface temperature anomalies in the northeastern part of the Pacific, closer to Alaska, because really what this suggests is maybe more of a neutral PDO or maybe even slightly a negative PDO. But I will give this model some credit. So we'll kind of look a little bit deeper into this model here since it's doing a decent job. And going back to winter, it's got some troughing here across central Canada, and it doesn't quite reach down to the parts or a little bit deeper into the central U.S. It doesn't really go down there. It kind of stays up in Canada. But if I were to show you guys precipitation anomalies, it doesn't look great. Here's one problem. You got a lot of dry air that could try to set up over across parts of the south and east. Why is it showing this? Well, there's one indicator why. Your subtropical jet stream may not be very active, and that's usually one ingredient for huge nor'easters. When our polar jet stream and a subtropical jet stream kind of come together, if those two pieces of energy phase together just right, you can get a monster nor'easter in the northeastern U.S. That could lead to a lot of snow, high winds. I mean, anything you could think of for a big nor'easter event. What these models are really suggesting is generally a more drier look, and the subtropical jet stream may not be very active. However, it does show a little bit of that polar jet stream. It does show some slightly above average anomalies over parts of British Columbia, down to parts of northern Idaho, far northwestern Montana, and northeastern Washington. So the polar jet stream will probably still be around, even but really, what the Kansas model suggests that some of these storm systems, especially from the polar jet stream, even though it may be a little bit deeper in the U.S., they might not have much moisture to go along with it. So really, overall, the Kansas model shows more of a drier look. Even if it's colder, it can still suggest a little bit more of a colder look. Now, if I were to show you guys 2-meter temperature anomalies, yeah, it's a little bit warm here. But like I said earlier, it's kind of picking up decently well with some of the 500 millibar GL potential high anomalies right now. So there's a little bit more trust in this model here. And you can see here, I think it's a little bit too warm. But regardless of that, the Kansas model shows generally a drier winter for a decent chunk of the eastern U.S. Some of that may be partially due to some of the ongoing drought over the central U.S., but we'll have to wait and see on that. Alright, the final model we're going to check out is the MME. It's actually an ensemble model. This isn't a model that kind of takes the majority of your global long-range models, kind of put into an average into one model. So these are your 2-meter temperature probabilities. You can see here there's a large area of the United States that has probabilities for at least above normal temperatures. But there's one red flag that I want to mention here, and that's the PDO, that's the negative PDO that is showing. At the moment, we're seeing more of a positive PDO in that area. If I were to kind of go back to right about now, so this is October, November, December, it still shows some below normal anomalies. But I think in reality, I think it's definitely underestimating or not really picking up very well on those above normal sea surface temperatures, because I think in reality, I think sea surface temperatures over some of these areas will be a little bit closer above normal, which will help lead to some of this colder air to be a little bit farther to the southeast, and potentially a little bit more deeper to the United States. So there's one thing in common all these models have, and that's not really picking up very well in the sea surface temperatures. Now, it could trend towards this direction here. Just at the moment, the models are just not picking up very well on those above normal sea surface temperatures. But we'll have to wait and see how the models kind of play along with that. But you can see here shows really about 2 or 3 states that has a chance for below average temperatures. I think they could be a little bit deeper than that, especially if it's missing out on the PDO region, which I've already said that several times. But yeah, overall, it shows a pretty decent signal for colder normal temperatures. You can see here it's pretty much locked up at Canada here, but I think in reality, I think a lot of that's going to be a little bit more deeper into the United States, and I think we can really back off some of these percentages as well. If anywhere that I believe that could see above normal temperatures, I think it's going to be in these areas. Hold on, let me draw that again. I think it's going to be in these areas right here. Where these areas here are red. I think these areas here could definitely be doable for some slightly above average or above average temperatures. How about precipitation? There's definitely a strong indication of above normal precipitation over parts of Montana, Idaho, even the parts of the Dakotas, and even the parts of Wyoming. This is some great news for some of these areas, because some of these areas, especially this year, it's been dealing with drought pretty much all year long. So if this were to verify here, this could definitely help with the ongoing drought issues over some of these areas. But this is also an indicator of a very active polar jet stream. If you kind of track the above normal precipitation anomalies, you can kind of see where your polar jet stream could actually track. And it kind of goes something like that. Let me kind of redraw this. There we go. Your polar jet stream, at least on an average track, kind of following one of those above normal precipitation anomalies, it could look something like this. And definitely shows a really good indication for well above normal precipitation in Montana and some of the surrounding areas. That could definitely be a big indicator for some pretty good snows up there, or multiple rounds of Alberta Clipper systems. And really, it kind of misses out parts of Western Oregon and Western Washington, which those areas typically in the La Nina pattern could see quite a bit of precipitation. I think this year, I think you guys would be closer to average. But a little bit more focused farther to the eastern U.S., there's some above normal anomalies across the Great Lakes, which indicates above normal lake effect snow. And there's some above normal anomalies for parts of the Ohio Valley into parts of the interior Northeast. You can actually kind of see here with the arrows here, they kind of flatten out a little bit. The trough itself or the jet stream kind of flattens out in the parts of eastern U.S. That kind of reminds me of a neutral pattern. You can kind of see here, it looks pretty similar to the average for a neutral Enzo, the polar jet stream. You can see here how it flattens out. You can still see pretty good snowstorms out of that. But if you really want to see big time nor'easters, if I were to go back here, you want your trough to be almost like a bowling ball, something like that. You can really see some big nor'easters with that. But with this indicator of below average precipitation across the south, the subtropical jet stream once again may not be very active. So I think the polar jet stream might be a little bit more flatter. And I think for areas in the parts of Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, you might be closer to average. But the far southwest you go, this may sound funny, but compared to average, it might be a little bit more above normal for some of these areas here across parts of the Ohio Valley, maybe in parts of the Atlantic, than the New England states. We're just going to have to wait and see how the sea surface temperature anomalies go, because at least from what it looks from that point, the polar jet stream may continue on a more easterly track here. But if we do start to see above normal sea surface temperature anomalies, it could definitely take more of a northern turn here, at least along the coastline. But at the moment, I think the general polar jet stream is going to look something like this, at least from what the MME's from an NMME standpoint. So definitely pretty interesting setup overall from this model here. And the last thing we're going to check out is the CPC forecast. And typically from the CPC, as we know of, they could be a little bit too warm. But this forecast here is definitely is a little bit more cooler than some of their previous forecasts in the past. They got below average chances for temperatures across really anywhere from the parts of the Northwest into parts of the Midwest. Not a terrible placement here, but I think it could be a little bit cooler than that. But they got two areas of above average temperatures. Got one over the desert southwest of parts of the Four Corner states. And you got another area along the East Coast. Now, for areas along the East Coast, that may be partially due to where we used to have above normal sea surface temperatures, because keep in mind, this was made back at September 15th. This is kind of before Fiona and Ian. And since then, the sea surface temperature anomalies has cooled down over these areas. So I'm kind of imagine if they actually focus on that, they may actually cut back on some of these above normal percentages up here. But we'll have to wait and see. They'll probably update this forecast here in about 10 to 14 more days or so, or 1 to 2 more weeks. We'll have to wait and see. But overall, it's not a bad forecast for temperatures. Precipitation wise, I do agree with it. We got above normal for parts of western Montana into the northern tip of Wyoming, or I meant to say Idaho. And I think those areas could see a good amount of snow, especially in those higher elevations. I think we could see a really good snow season, especially for any skiers over parts of the Northern Rockies. I think you guys could have a good year this time. Uh, there's another area over parts of the Ohio Valley that can always be an indicator of above normal snowfall or above normal rainfall. Precipitation, that could be anywhere from rain, snow, sleet, or freezing rain. But really, they got the Ohio Valley in the bullseye. They see some of the greatest opportunities for above normal precipitation, which I would agree. Or in other words, maybe a chance for some above normal snowfall. We'll have to wait and see. And then lastly, they got pretty much the entire southern U.S. with below average precipitation, which I do agree with as well. Of course, their forecast will probably change a little bit over the next couple months, but I think, at least from their forecast at the moment, I do agree with it. Maybe not so much for the eastern U.S. at the moment, but we'll see what they'll say on the next update. But anyways, guys, that's all for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys like this video, hit the like button if you do like my channel. hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notification so you never miss an upload. If you guys have questions about this, put a comment section down below. Or you guys questions. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye and have a good day.